from the next round joins us right now. And Ryan, we haven't spoken to you yet since the sports world in Alabama just exploded with an innocuous tweet from Chris Lowe. Just, hey, Nick Saban's retiring. Just thought you guys should know. So let's go back to that first before we talk about the future. Did you at all suspect that that was coming when Chris Lowe broke the news via Twitter?
So, do you want the? I'll give you the boiled down version of the story of that day if you want it.
Sure,
is that what you want?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, the rumors obviously had been out there all season long, but that was not uncommon of late. The older, Nick Saban has gotten, the more those rumors would spark that this is his last year. If he wins the national championship, if he loses in the playoffs, this will be his last year. I mean, you heard a lot of that, but this year was probably more intense. And frankly, it was coming from, more national people, not just local people. So you kind of wondered, was there something to it? But you hear it so often, you almost get immune to it at that time every year. And again, it had sparked up, the week or so between the loss in the Rose Bowl and the national championship game. That day, that was a Wednesday, that day about 2:30, I get a call from someone that I know and trust in the sports world, and he is outside of the Alabama bubble. Like, he is not at all impacted by what's going on in Tuscaloosa or Birmingham or anything like that. And he says, hey, I just want to give you a heads up, I'm pretty sure Saban's retiring. And I was like, really? I mean, I've heard the rumors. He goes, well, let me tell you who my source is. And he told me who his source was. And I was like, all right, that's pretty legit right there. That's about as good as I could do. And he goes, yeah. He said, I think it's going down today. I was like, there's no way it's going down today. He said, no, it's going down today. You need to check on this. That's about 2:30. So I start making phone calls, and my partners on the show, Jim Dunaway and Lance Taylor, start making phone calls. We reach out to everybody we can, and I mean, like, guys that are inside the building, on the staff. And to a man, they were like, if it's happening today, it's news to me. Like, multiple times we were told he was interviewing assistant coaches today for new jobs. And that same day, Georgia had offered Travaris Robinson, T-Rob, who was basically the de facto defensive coordinator, a job. And I was told, he spent a lot of the morning putting that fire out and getting T-Rob settled. And I think he's past that. And I mean, I'm telling you, people on the staff were like, if it's happening today, it's news to me. And then about 4 o'clock, they had a team meeting, and we were told by people, again, on the staff, hey, this is a normal team meeting, back to school. They do this every year on the first day of class. This is not like some hastily called team meeting. And then about 3 minutes after 4, a person who was in the meeting on the staff texted Jim Dunaway, one of my co-hosts, and said, oh, blank, he just told us he's retiring. And you guys know the business. We're like, well, that's a pretty good source, but you do not want to screw this story up. And he could be screwing with us. We've got to get two sources. And about the time we said that, Chris Lowe then reported it. And when Chris reports it, yeah, it's a pretty good source there. So, yeah, that's how that day went down. And so that is a long way of saying, in a sense, I'm surprised that it happened that way and that his staff was caught off guard. But in a sense, I'm not surprised because this rumor intensified every year, and you knew at some point he was going to retire.
And so, Ryan, that sort of leads us into the question that, we have the benefit of hindsight now. We see what's happened with Alabama's roster since that decision was made. Did Saban sort of do Alabama a disservice by not getting out ahead of this, maybe saying before the playoff, hey, this is the last run, allow them to work the portal a little bit differently, allow time to the roster to settle down a little bit more? Or is this just the way that it was going to be regardless of when he said it?
Well, I think this is the way it was going to be. I think the last thing he wanted was, hey, this is Nick Saban's final game or this is Nick Saban's final season. He was never going to be that guy. And I do think, you could argue that he did Alabama a disservice, but he did his current roster a big service by doing it when he did it. If he had waited, and you'll see this in the next couple of days when Jim Harbaugh takes the Chargers job and their 30-day window, transfer portal window opens, it will not be near as active, I wouldn't think, as Alabama's for this reason. Most places, school has started back, so you've missed spring enrollment, and you've already started your classes. Had Nick Saban waited a couple of weeks and done it, say, right now, Alabama players, by and large, would have been stuck in Tuscaloosa, whether they wanted to be or not, for another semester. They've already started. There'd be no benefit to dropping out of school and moving somewhere. You would just wait till the spring portal. And so by him doing it when he did it, it gave Caleb Downs and guys like that an opportunity, Julian saying, to test the market in that 30-day window before Ohio State or Texas or Florida State had started classes back, and they were able to enroll and be part of the spring semester. So in a sense, he did it in a time where his roster could at least have an opportunity to pursue all their options, and many of them chose to do that.
And so, to bring it full circle now, new day in Alabama, a new era about to start. What are your early thoughts on Kalen DeBoer?
Well, it's been interesting to watch. All the feedback from Tuscaloosa about him has been good. You talk to the players that have stuck around; they like what they've seen so far. He's built an interesting staff. It's not a conventional Southeastern Conference staff. I mean, this is not the way a staff would look if you had hired a guy that has been a lifer in the SEC. He's gotten two sitting head coaches to leave their jobs, one to be a position coach, and the other, obviously, in Kane Womack, to be a defensive coordinator. He retained his offensive staff from Washington and hired a brand new defensive staff, which I found very interesting, that basically the defensive staff, many of whom had been with him nearly every step of the way, were pretty much left behind. So I think it's an interesting staff. The truth will be immediately told on him on this next signing day, because Ryan Williams is the top remaining player in the state. He was the top player in the state. He was an Alabama commitment. He decommitted from Alabama the day Nick Saban announced his retirement, but there had been rumblings that he was going to anyway. And if he can swing him back, Alabama fans will get thrilled about that. And then I think a lot of Alabama fans are waiting to see what Alabama does when the spring portal opens up. They're going to have to be active there, because just purely with the roster numbers.
A common refrain during all this was, you don't want to be the guy that follows the guy. Everybody said that. How many guys said no to Alabama, if anybody at all said no to Alabama during this?
I mean, I think Greg Byrne, is never going to answer that question. I think you could reasonably, without going way out on a limb, at least discuss the possibility that Dan Lanning said no. I believe that was probably Greg Byrne's first choice. It was Dan Lanning. I will say this, though, about Kalen DeBoer. Nick Saban retired. He told his team at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. And Thursday night at 7 o'clock, the Burns and the DeBoers were having dinner in Seattle. So to say that, DeBoer was a second or third or fourth choice, I don't think is very accurate. I mean, that was one of his immediate targets. He was already in Seattle, having dinner with him. I think those were the two primary targets. I think, when you see the other guys that got pay raises off of this than the Mike Norvells of the world, I think that was just Jimmy Sexton doing what he does. And, was Kalen DeBoer the first choice? I don't know. Greg Byrne says he didn't approach it that way, that he had two or three guys that were his primary choices, and he weighed them against one another. None of them were the first choice, second choice, or third choice. I think that's kind of what you say, because you don't want your guy, you don't want to say that about your guy. Ultimately, if it wins, it doesn't matter if he's the fifth choice. But I do think Kalen DeBoer was very high on his list. The only guy that you could convince me said no would probably be Dan Lanning.
Got about a minute and a half here before the break, so real quick, will Kalen DeBoer win at Alabama?
Well, I mean, he's going to be given every resource needed. Now, Alabama's got to catch up in the NIL game. They have lagged a little bit behind. I think there was a sense of comfort of having Nick Saban, that you felt like you didn't have to be as NIL heavy as some other schools. So they're going to have to catch up in that. Obviously, facilities are as good as they've been. Recruiting has been really good. Even with the departures, you take over a very good roster and a winning culture. And I think the guys, I mean, his record's really good. I know everybody's like, well, he's never done it in the SEC. He hasn't. Neither had Nick Saban when he came to LSU. Neither had Urban Meyer when he came to Florida. So, just because you're from outside the Southeastern Conference doesn't mean you can win there. His record's tremendous. I think he's got an opportunity, especially in an expanded 12-team playoff world, to pick up where Nick Saban left off. And nobody's ever going to be Nick Saban again. Those days, that's gone. But I think he can win at Alabama. Yeah, I think he's suited to do it.
Ryan, I'm putting you on the spot here. Are you good to hang through a break, or do we have to let you go?
No, I can hang through.
Oh, great. You're the best. Ryan Brown of the Next Round joins us on the Farm Bureau guest line. Check out favorites.com and go with the home team. He'll join us when we come back. I got a couple more questions about Alabama, then we'll get some big picture college football thoughts as we move along through the afternoon. I'm Borky. He's Haydag. Ryan Brown joins us on the phone right now from the Next Round, talking Kalen DeBoer, Alabama, and more with you. So, Ryan, another common refrain on top of you don't want to be the guy that follows the guy is Alabama fans are going to expect DeBoer to be Nick Saban, and he won't be, so he'll get run out of town quickly. So what are your thoughts on that? What are the expectations for Kalen DeBoer? Are they going to be the exact results as Nick Saban? And if he doesn't deliver those, is his time there short-lived?
No, I think Alabama fans are realistic enough to know, and I know a lot of people roll your eyes when you call Alabama fans anything close to realistic. Realistic enough to know that was a once-in-a-lifetime era of football, right? So I think, they'll understand because, they may be passionate fans and sometimes unrealistic fans, but they're smart enough to understand that you're never going to relive that era of football again. So I think Alabama fans will expect him to contend for championships. They will want SEC championships. They'll want to be in the playoffs. But I think they'll know, especially in this new playoff era, you're never going to win at that level again. So I think there will be some patience for him. Now he can't perform awful and miss playoffs and things like that and keep his job. That's not going to happen. But I do think there will be some patience for Kalen DeBoer, understanding, the situation in which he took over and all that he faced after that, and what Nick Saban was able to do is something that's never going to be done again.
Let's look at the other side of the coin here, Ryan. What's the Auburn reaction to all this been?
Oh, they're thrilled. They're thrilled. I mean, Nick Saban is gone. They've been waiting for this day for years. So, Auburn fans are thrilled about it. They think Alabama has hired a poor coach. They call him Harsin 2.0, the Harsin, So, yeah, I mean, they're living their best life right now. Auburn fans are. They love every minute of this. And, look, it's hard to blame them. Nick Saban dominated that rivalry. He won all the championships. He made life tough to be an Auburn fan in the state of Alabama. So, yeah, they're thrilled that this has transpired the way it has. There's no doubt.
So what does year one look like for Kalen DeBoer? Obviously, we got to figure out a lot more of Alabama's roster. They're going to have to hit that spring portal window hard, like you said. But, when you look at their schedule, when you think about what their two deep is probably going to look like, what does the first season look like in Tuscaloosa for him?
Well, I mean, I think bare minimum the expectation from Alabama fans would be a 10-2 playoff. And that's just an acceptable season. That's not a good season. That's an acceptable season. I think that's going to be your bare minimum expectations is that they go 10-2 and make the college football playoffs. And then just making the playoffs is not going to be enough. They're going to want you to advance. And, that's the whole thing when you ask about, what are expectations and how will he be viewed. I've never lived in the expanded playoff era. I don't know what an Alabama fan would feel about just making a 12-team playoff. Is that enough or I don't know. I mean, I've never lived through this. My gut tells me that that's a bare minimum for almost every year for an Alabama fan is just to make that 12-team playoff. And then, anything above that, then you start talking about, how successful you were or unsuccessful you were, if you don't advance. So that's what my gut tells me. But again, I've never lived through this, so I'm not entirely sure yet.
And then the same kind of question for Auburn now, coming out of year one of Hugh Freeze. It feels like they're going to go with Peyton Thorne again unless something big happens in the spring window. What does Auburn look like next season?
Well, I think, fans expect the next step forward. I think they would be expecting a 9 or 10 win season. I don't know that Auburn fans expect 100% a playoff challenge. But I do think, an obvious step forward. And as you said, Auburn fans were, I think, by and large, ready to move on from Peyton Thorne. And he decided to stick with Peyton Thorne. So I do think, there's a little bit of pressure on there. If you start losing games because of poor quarterback play, that is a direct reflection of a coach's choice that did not work out. So, I think, some of it is not just the 9 wins, but how do you get to the 9 wins? Are you having to overcome bad quarterback play all the time? It's an interesting year, I think, for both coaches in this state because of obviously DeBoer being in his first year, but Hugh Freeze basically standing pat with a quarterback that I think for a lot of Auburn fans underperformed most of the year. He had a couple good games, but other than that, they were very, very limited quarterback spot.
Why did Ron Roberts leave Auburn?
That's a great question. I don't know. That the defense now, look, there's so much magnified on 4th and 31 and the defensive, scheme they used on that play. It was dumb. Nobody's going to argue that. But, by and large, that defense played pretty well this year. I mean, that defense saved them in a lot of games where the offense was not very good. I don't know. I do not know the answer to that. I thought it was rather odd. They still have not totally replaced him. I mean, you've got Charles Kelly in there, but he's listed as a co-defensive coordinator. A lot of people think he's just there for the recruiting aspect of it. And they're looking at Chris Kiffin. They're looking at DJ Durkin. So I think they'll have an announcement very soon. But I thought it was an interesting move. I thought Ron Roberts was a guy, when you looked at both coordinators, there was no doubt Philip Montgomery was going to take the fall for the offense. But Ron Roberts was a guy that by and large did a pretty good job.
Ryan Brown in the next round joining us right now. You mentioned Harbaugh earlier. I want to get your thoughts on that. Not only Harbaugh leaving Michigan with 2 different NCAA investigations in his wake, taking the Chargers job, and also what does Michigan do, or what do you think they do anyway, to replace him?
The report I saw today mentioned also that he would be taking Jesse Minter with him, the defensive coordinator, which, I mean, that's a really, really big loss to lose both Harbaugh and Minter because Minter had done a really, really good job this year. I think the interesting thing is, do they go Sharon Moore, or do they see what else might be out there, see who is interested, see what names that, pop up and are interested in taking that job? Part of me, it's a really, really good job that is in a pretty good spot right now. They are losing a good bit, but it's the best Michigan has been in quite a while. I kind of want to see what's out there. I mean, I know that Brian Kelly rumor has been out there quite a while. If I could get Brian Kelly, I think I would take him over Sharon Moore personally. He's a known commodity, and I might be able to keep Sharon Moore. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Michigan does in that situation.
If that were to come to pass, and you mentioned Brian Kelly there, where does the carousel, the big jobs on this year's carousel have been incredible. If Michigan were to go to Brian Kelly, and I think they're just going to promote from within, but if they did, where does LSU go?
Well, I mean, it's going to be the same names you see for, all the Jimmy Sexton jobs. You're going to get Lane Kiffin's name thrown in there. You're going to get, some big-time names thrown in there. It's a big-time job. I mean, I think the line – in a lot of ways would start at the door because I think Brian Kelly has recruited pretty well there. I think 5th and 7th his last 2 years there recruiting. So you appear to be in a pretty good spot roster-wise. Listen, the last 3 coaches have won national championships at LSU, and 2 of those guys, at times appear to be complete idiots. And it's a place where you can go win championships. So I don't think you would have any trouble finding a head coach to take the LSU job.
Ryan, thanks so much for your time. You're too kind with it, and keep up the good work over there.